Welcome to The Snap with Alexis Perry and Sydney Jones.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Broncos Podcast Network and YouTube for this week's edition of The Snap. I'm Sydney Jones, your host, joined as always by my good friend Alexis Perry. Guys, it is officially March, which means the new league year in free agency is right around the corner. But this month is also special because it is Women's History Month. And as you all know by now, that here on The Snap, one of our main goals is to highlight women's impact in and around the NFL. So we're really going to emphasize that this month by releasing 4 special edition episodes to celebrate female leaders in the NFL. We'll be introducing and highlighting women from multiple aspects of the game. We'll have guests ranging from league executives to brand builders of our team. So without further ado, it's time to introduce our first Women's History Month guest, the National Football League's Senior Director of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion, Sam Rapoport. Sam, thanks so much for joining us on the show today and for helping us kick off Women's History Month.
Thanks, Sydney. Thanks, Alexis. I'm pumped to chat with you both.
We're pumped to chat with you. Sam, you are a trailblazer for women in the sports industry. Like I mentioned, you're the league senior director of diversity, equity, inclusion. You started the NFL's Women's Careers in Football Forum. You were named one of Sports Illustrated's most powerful, most influential, and most outstanding women in sports for 2020. I mean, the list of accolades you have goes on, and we'll certainly get to those. But, just to start, we want to learn a little bit more about you. So when and where did your love for football start?
Sure. So I grew up in Canada. And football was offered at my school, at my high school and junior high school. So naturally, I just started playing football like I did some other sports. And I felt very average at all the other sports I played. I ran track and I played basketball and soccer, but I felt very average. And as soon as I put a football in my hand, I felt really good at something. And for, an adolescent girl, preteen girl growing up, that felt really great. And so I started to watch football kind of over my dad's shoulder. He was a big Dolphins fan. And I just kind of started watching over his shoulder. And, he played football. He played tackle football in Canada at the college level. And, he always joked that there's a football gene, and he passed it down to me because he didn't push it on me. He never tried to get me to like football. It really came naturally. And I was quite obsessed with the sport, and I still am.
Well, let's walk through the path and how you got to your current position. I think I read that you started out as a marketing intern with the league. How did you land that internship?
Yeah, I did. In 2003, I started as a kind of a design marketing internship. I had absolutely no background in that whatsoever. They kind of placed me where I was needed. But, growing up in Canada, it was difficult. I didn't have any connections to the NFL, but I knew I really wanted to work there. So I decided I had to do something a little unique with my resume to make it stand out. So when I played football, I was a quarterback. And so I sent a football with my resume to the league office. And on the football in a Sharpie, I wrote what other quarterback could accurately deliver a pass 386 miles, which was the distance between Montreal and New York at the time where I went to school. And, it stood out, and, it's gimmicky, and it makes me cringe a little now to even think about it. But I had no connection, so I had to use some ingenuity to get it done.
Oh my gosh, I absolutely love it. I mean, that's brilliant, honestly. Brilliant. Talk about eye-catching, right? Well, we know that you then worked for USA Football for a few years. You came back to the NFL in 2016, working in football development until you started with your current role. So for those at home listening who might not know, what exactly do you do in your current position?
Sure. So I work in the Diversity, Equity, Inclusion Department. I report to our Chief Diversity Officer, Jonathan Bean, who is absolutely fantastic. And really what we do is we create, processes and policies and programs to help increase the equity and diversity and inclusion at the league office and to assist our 32 clubs in the same space. So, the women's programming is just a portion of what we do for marginalized and underrepresented groups of people to help them feel more enfranchised at the league office or at the 32 clubs, and also our fan base as well.
Yeah. When you think back to your playing days, like you mentioned a little bit earlier, Sam, did you ever think that you would be working for the league at this capacity?
No, it's funny. I always knew I wanted to work for the NFL. And if you ask anyone I went to high school with, they would all tell you that they're not surprised that I work in the NFL. Every high school essay, every poem I had to write was about football. And, I would play football by myself in my room all day long and all night long. And, I was just that kind of football nut who was obsessed with it. So growing up, I'm not sure I ever felt like it would be a reality, but I did feel like, what in the world else would I do, And so I was lucky enough to get that first internship and turn it into something bigger.
Yeah. Did you ever think about coaching at all then, or was it kind of always wanting to be on the executive side of things?
It's funny, I grew up with two parents who really kind of gave me no limits and really raised me to believe that I could do anything. But I never even imagined the coaching trajectory to be for me, because I never had seen a female football coach. And I played my whole life. I watched the NFL, I watched the CFL. You never even heard the word female in coaching in the same sentence, never mind any type of representation around it. So, in retrospect, I would have loved to be a football coach. Like I loved the sport in that capacity. And I coach youth football a little bit on the flag football side for girls. But part of why I'm passionate about what I do is I don't want girls now growing up thinking that this isn't for them, because women like Jennifer King and Callie Brownson and Lo Locust, they're demonstrating to them that it is for them too.
Sam, I know you just touched on this a little bit, but looking back to when you first started at the league, at that internship, to now, how would you describe the progress you've seen in regard to women in sports over the years?
I think, in the past 5 to 7 years, has certainly been an inflection point for women on the football side. 6 years ago, we had no female coaches. We had very few female scouts in the league. And now we're up to 11 female scouts and 8 female coaches and, 2 full-time female officials. And, we're really starting to see progress. And so, as long as Commissioner Goodell has been leading our league, he's always made it a priority. And a lot of people don't know what he does behind the scenes to help advance women in football. And, when I first started out, a couple years later, I presented an idea to him and a group of people about starting a girls flag football program at the league office. And he kind of interrupted the meeting and he stopped and he's like, yes, we're doing that. So he's been supporting this behind the scenes for a really long time. Mm-hmm. It's always been a priority at the league since I've been there, but, we've certainly seen a lot more firsts in the past 6 years.
Well, so much of that progress is thanks to you. So I think I can speak on behalf of all women in sports and I say a big hat tip to you. Thank you so much for what you've done. But back in 2017, you created the NFL Women's Careers in Football Forum. So how did this idea come to fruition?
So in my role at USA Football, I started a program called the Women's World Football Games. And that program brought female tackle football players from all over the world, literally Russia, New Zealand, you name it, China, they came from there, to the United States for 1 week to play on a football field and learn the game for 1 week. And I remember standing on the sidelines and saying, no one knows about the thousands of women that are playing and coaching this sport, right, that feel completely disenfranchised from the league because we have no connections. And the reality, Alexis, is that we don't run in the same football circles as men do. And so the idea for the program came, it spawned from that. And the idea was, how do we get these women, right, who play the sport or who coach the sport or who love the sport in a room with people who could potentially hire them and let their experience and their passion speak for itself, right? We don't get anyone jobs. They do it on their own. And so that's really where the idea came from. As I saw these thousands of women, I said, we need to build a bridge. And, I really credit Troy Vincent for, he's the head of football operations. He was the one who hired me on, who said, yep, we're going to do this. And it really takes leaders like that to get things like this started.
I know Roger Goodell has, been so involved with all of this as well. What were those initial conversations like with him?
Yeah, so I was still at USA Football, and he and his wife Jane Skinner Goodell asked me to lead a flag football clinic in Roger's hometown. And so I was playing football with him on the field, and we always get very competitive with our 9-year-old football teams against each other. But I brought this idea up to him, and I kind of mentioned that they're there, right? The talent pool is there. We just don't have a connection point. And, he connected me with people, in the office who could help get that done, and connected me with Troy Vincent, who then, was ultimately the person who said, yep, absolutely, we're doing this. So, behind this effort were a lot of male champions who could have gone either way and said, no, we're not going to invest in this, or we're not going to focus on this, but they chose to. And so Commissioner Goodell and Troy Vincent were integral in the progress that we've seen.
Well, your 5th annual forum was last week. Congratulations. For our listeners who weren't able to be a part of that, what topics were discussed and who were some of the guests that you guys had?
Yeah, absolutely. So our 5th year was virtual, obviously, because of the pandemic. And, because of that, we were able to attract guests who may previously not have had the time to do it, right? For the first year, we had Coach Bill Belichick involved. We had the Super Bowl champ leadership team, Darcy Glazer-Kasowitz, Bruce Arians, and Jason Light. We had members of the Denver Broncos. We had several people who were a part of this, including Emily Zayler, coach on the Broncos, who were involved and wanted to be a part of this progress. And so, we saw what we tried to accomplish on day one was inspiring the women to demonstrate them, to show them that we want them and that they belong in the NFL. And day two of the program was really focused on getting them connected with people who could potentially hire them. And in the past 2 years, 31 out of the 32 NFL clubs have been involved in this program. I'm not going to mention which club isn't, but you know who you are and you need to be involved next year. That it really is remarkable to see how how pretty much all of the NFL has raised their hands and said, yes, we want to get involved.
Yeah, you mentioned this a little bit earlier, Sam. You talk about, bridging the gap between these women who, love football, play it, consume it, and pairing them with jobs like you're doing at this football forum. Since it is a week removed now, you've kind of had more time to think about it. How rewarding, has it been to see how this football forum has, impact young female leaders in this industry?
Yeah, it's remarkable, and it's not lost on me or my co-pilots on this program, Vanessa Hutchinson and Andy Jamal. We were just talking right before this Zoom, and the thank you letters that we got from the participants were not just thank you, this was great, right? Like, I can't even articulate some of the words that they used, but it really was, you all changed my life, and this changed the trajectory of my career, and now I believe that I belong. Previously, I wasn't sure if this was for me. I was thinking of going into another direction, and you receive enough of these to realize that we are making a difference in this. And really, but the people that are actually doing the work to make the difference are the folks that are hiring them, right? So we've already had 2 offers go out to our participants. We've already had 7 clubs reach out asking for resumes to add them to their short list. So, in the short period of time since we've completed this program, we've already seen progress. And Maral Javadifar is the Tampa Bay coach, strength coach, and she kind of stopped me last year and pulled me aside and said, like, you better close your eyes and take this in, because I don't know if you realize kind of what's happening here. And the 3 of us who are leading in this space, I kind of relayed that to my partners on this, and we all kind of said, wow, it is great. We feel like we're doing something that has meaningful societal implications, and that's meaningful to us in our work.
I had the opportunity to watch a live stream of day one of your forum, Sam, and just listening to the women speak on it, it was incredible for me to think about, right now, like you mentioned, we have 8 full-time female coaches and I believe 8 full-time female athletic trainers in the NFL. Sarah Thomas just made history becoming the first female to officiate a Super Bowl. We've made so much progress, but there's still a ways to go. So, Sam, what changes would you like to see for women in sports, moving forward from here on out?
I think the biggest change I'd like to see is us moving from 1 woman to 2. And it's a small point to make, but I think it's really critical for us to remove the spotlight from 1 woman. And if she succeeds, then women belong in football. And if she fails or doesn't get a job, that women don't, right? That's ludicrous. So, I really applaud what Coach Arians did, because, around the Super Bowl, we weren't only talking about Coach Locust or Coach Javadifar. We were talking about women are now ubiquitous on the Tampa Bay Buccaneers squad, right? Mm-hmm. And moving towards ubiquity is our ultimate mission. We want this to normalize. We don't want this to be something that media is interested in talking about anymore. We just want to let women do their jobs. And so I really think the next step is moving from 1 to 2 on each club in scouting and coaching and video and equipment, you name it. So it just starts to get a little more normal until we're not talking about it anymore. And, we studied other fields like, the first female doctor and the first female astronaut. And, it's starting to become normal where no one's really saying like, oh, I have a female doctor anymore. It's just, I have a doctor and it's a she. And that's where we're looking to move with females on the football side.
All right. One last question here for you, Sam. What is one piece of advice that you would give women trying to break into this industry, no matter what field it is exactly?
I mean, the first is garnering the motivation to do it and know that you belong. You have to believe in yourself and bet on yourself to know that you do belong and you deserve it. And the second piece of advice really would be to find what makes you unique and what makes you stand out, and double down on that and focus on that. So what a lot of mistakes people make when they're applying is they speak in very general terms. So, I'm a hard worker, I'm diligent, I'm punctual, I'm this, I'm that, but that's not helpful. What's helpful is like specifically, how can you make the Denver Broncos a better football team, right? And so focusing on specifically what you've done in the past and what you can offer as a unique individual in this space is really important to distinguish you from other candidates who apply.
Great advice, Sam. If you look at just about every facet of the sports world, women are here. We're gladly pulling our seats up to the table. And you know what, you're a huge reason for that. So, thank you for inspiring us, paving a way for us. And, thank you for just taking the time today to sit down and chat with us.
It was my pleasure. Thank you both for having me and for telling the story. And we really appreciate it. And I hope it'll serve for other clubs to, get on board and continue to include the entire talent pipeline when they're hiring folks.
Well, guys, that's all the time we have for today. Another huge thank you to Sam Rapoport for helping us kick off our month-long campaign to celebrate Women's History Month. And just so you all know, from here on out, new episodes of The Snap will be released on Friday mornings now. So make sure to tune in every Friday to the Broncos Podcast Network and YouTube for a new episode. We'll see y'all next week.